Hey, remember Nobunaga's Ambition Sphere of Influence Ascension? That one Nobunaga's game where you can play as an officer slowly rising through the ranks instead of playing as the whole faction? Don't you just wish that there is a series out there that allows you to do just that instead of such a feature being limited to just one Nobunaga's Ambition spin-off? Well, actually there is, or was, and that series is called Taikō Risshiden. Taikō Risshiden roughly translated as the success story of the Grand Regent, or Ascension story of the Grand Regent if we want to follow the naming convention of the previously mentioned Nobunaga's Ambition title, was Koei's another take on the Sengoku Jidai. Though unlike its older brother Nobunaga's Ambition, which focuses on large-scale domestics and warfare, Taikō Risshiden focuses on personal dramas and growth. The first title of the series was released way back in 1992 for the PC 9800 series and then got ported to the Super Famicom a year later. Afterwards, it got re-released on other platforms every half a decade or so and finally arrived on Steam in 2017 as part of Koei Shibusawa Archives bundle. As the title suggests, the player takes on the role of Kinoshita Tokijiro, living through the events in his life until he eventually becomes Toyotomi Hideyoshi and the Grand Regent of all of Japan. That said though, immediately from the second title onwards, the series allows the player to play as other historical officers too, instead of limiting the playable character to just Hideyoshi. Interesting that the series also went through a bit of art direction change every now and then too, with the portraits of the first and second title being not too dissimilar to Nobunaga's Ambition. Then the third and fourth title opted for a more anime-ish approach instead. Then with the fifth and the currently latest title, they went back to be more in line with Nobunaga's Ambition once again. As lovely as the idea of doing a retrospective review on the series as a whole is, this video will focus mainly on the fifth title because it's the latest in the series, and the deluxe release in 2022 is the version that I have rarely available to get footage from. So yeah, let's get it on with the video then. Taikō Risshiden V was first released for the Windows in March of 2004, then got ported to the PlayStation 2 later in the same year. The game would later get ported to the PlayStation Portable in 2009, and then it went on to receive a deluxe version port for the Nintendo Switch and Steam in 2022. The game boasts an impressive list of over 850 playable characters, of which the deluxe version would go on to add 100 more. Though not all characters are created equal obviously, and at first you only have 5 characters to choose from and the 1560 AD scenario to start in. Everything else must be slowly unlocked throughout the game. The initial 5 playable characters are Kinoshita Tokijiro for Samurai play, Hattori Hanzo for Ninja play, Yagyu Muneyoshi for Swordsman play, Kuki Yoshitaka for Pirate play, and finally Naya Sukezaemon for Merchant play. These 5 roles are featured heavily on the game poster, but these aren't all the roles that are available in the game, as there are also the Doctor, the Blacksmith, and the Tea Master. But these 3 roles, although they do have their own unique endings, they don't have specific game mechanics dedicated to them, which probably was why they weren't featured on the game cover. For Samurai play, if you start out as a common officer, you can be assigned tasks to do by your daimyo after each war council, of which you must fulfill to accumulate these until you are promoted to be a lord of your own castle to govern over, and the ultimate goal is total unification. If you have played any of the Romance of the Three Kingdoms game that allows you to play as an individual officer, then the flow of this game is rather similar to those. However, the given tasks are more varied than just develop that facility for an X amount of points, and usually the task can be done via one single action, leaving you a lot of free time to explore the world and do whatever you want until the next World Council. For ninja play, you can be a member of a ninja village and receive missions directly from your village elder, which can be various odd jobs from different clans. The ultimate goal of this role is to defeat all other ninja villages scattered all across Japan, or just simply learn all the available ninjutsu abilities, which is a lot easier said than done because the majority of the abilities cannot be learned via normal means and may require you to read a guide to see what's up. For swordsman play, you can either establish your own dojo, take on disciples and prove to everyone that your school of swordsmanship is the best in the land, or participate and win the yearly martial arts tournament held every June in the capital. This is probably the role with the most freedom, but also can be the most tedious because most swordsman characters don't have good intelligence or charisma stats, so making money as a swordsman is a lot harder than other characters, at least it was in my experience. And I probably should touch on how the fighting works in this game. The fight is kinda turn-based, but you, your allies, as well as the enemies all decide the action to make within the same turn, and then move into place and do the action all at once. The base movement range is the same for everyone, but the attack range as well as the abilities you can do vary depending on what kind of weapon the character is equipping, with the weapon list being sword, spear, kusarigama, bow and arrow, shuriken, and finally musket. To be able to use abilities in the fight, you must spend spirit points, indicated by the icons under the health bar right here. The maximum amount of spirit points you can have at once depends on the martial arts affinity your character currently has. The abilities you can use aren't all just offensive attacks, but there is also a healthy variety of supporting buff and debuff, and not all abilities are learned just by studying under a dojo. Some can only be learned by experimenting with other character roles, like the ability to throw money to distract the enemy can only be learned by studying trading under a merchant, or the shadow clone jutsu can only be learned by maxing out your ninjutsu affinity. The pirate play is somewhat similar to samurai play, but rather than governing over a castle, your pirate gang governs over a pirate fort and must ally with a daimyo to progress through the game. Naval battle also plays out rather similarly to land battle, just, on water. The ultimate goal of this role is to conquer all other pirate forts scattering across the land. The merchant play involves buying goods cheap and then reselling them somewhere else at a higher price, establishing merchant guilds and investing money to expand the marketplace. Each town has their own economy, with items in one place being dirt cheap may cost a fortune in another. But constant buying and reselling of the same items will shoot price of said items up in the town where it used to be cheap and decrease the value of it in the town where it used to be expensive. The price of the marketplaces constantly fluctuate, making the information you gathered last month might not still be true in the next. And if you are carrying a large quantity of goods while traveling, you can get targeted by bandits or pirates while on the road, so being a skilled fighter yourself or remembering to hire a bodyguard before setting off is a must. Because there are a lot more variables in merchant play, and having trading being the main gameplay focus is not something you see in a lot of games, merchant play is probably my most favorite kind of play style in the game. There are some actions exclusively available for certain roles, like ordering and receiving tasks from your daimyo or pirate boss being the obvious example, but the basic stuff can be used by anyone. Just because you play as a samurai, the game doesn't stop you from going to ninja villages and study ninjutsu. Just because you play as a merchant, the game doesn't stop you from going to dojos to study some self-defense. You can mix and match the play style as you see fit all throughout your journey, making the possibilities almost endless. Helps that the various tasks are presented as minigames instead of simply just being a few button clicks like how they usually do in the ROTK games. Most of them are pretty fun too, but fuck me if I didn't struggle with the math minigame. Shit. Also, earlier I mentioned that when you first start the game, you are locked to just 5 protagonists and 1 scenario, and the rest need to be unlocked by playing the game, remember? The characters, fighting abilities, battle tactics, titles, and famous places are displayed as cards in a list, and doing various things throughout the game unlock these cards. Once a certain amount of cards are unlocked, you also gain access to new game features like new scenarios or create a character mode. Unlocking characters is the most interesting thing out of all of these, with over 850 characters in the original game and the deluxe version adding 100 more, bringing the total number of playable characters to 960. The process to unlock them all is a very lengthy journey in and of itself. The playable characters can be categorized in 3 different types. Blue cards are common officers with nothing special about them. The cards with golden outlines are the more special ones who participate in an event or two. And finally, the cards with red and blue backgrounds are those with unique storylines to them. Most of the officers can be unlocked by raising a relationship between them and your player character, which can easily be done by inviting them to drink tea a couple of times, but there are those who don't like tea, the nerves of them. Or there are those who require you to answer correctly to a quiz or beat them up in a duel. There are even some that have specific unlocking conditions, like requiring you to unlock another officer that has the same name first, or requiring you to see certain historical events before you can unlock them. Because of this, aside from the stuff you could do normally, the game also offers this gotta catch them all metagame where you can't help but play the game just a bit more just to see which officers you are close to unlock. Or if you have in mind a certain officer that you want to have a playthrough next, there is an excitement of figuring out what his unlocking conditions are. And not stopping with just adding more playable characters, the deluxe version also added way more stuff like new scenarios, new ability cards, new historical events, and even new endings. So if you love historical simulation and are a completionist, the game has a gigantic amount of content to offer. And not stopping with just the contents the developers put into the game, the Windows version of Taikō 5 also came with this thing called Event Converter, which is a tool that allows you to create special in-game events with just simple text editors like the Notepad. The tool does require specific scripting formats, so you need to do some learning, but aside from the absolute blocker being that the tool only understands Japanese and maybe Chinese, I don't know, the scripting format isn't as hard to understand as learning actual coding, so it's something. If you search for Taikō 5 on YouTube or other videos sharing platform, then there are plenty of videos of people sharing their custom-made events, ranging from what-if scenarios to isekai plotlines, or even not so subtle husband and wife nighttime activity. No explicit image can be shown though, obviously. So with all that I have said, the game sounds pretty cool, right? So what's the catch? What's the flaws to go along with all this roleplay and meta progression goodness that the game offers? Well, for one, the battle system didn't age very well. I mean, it is serviceable, but there is a noticeable lack of map variety even with the deluxe version. And the AI isn't exactly the best, as they can't seem to figure out that they should pile up on an enemy unit one at a time instead of spreading their force out. And if you battle on a map with a river, then the AI is very reluctant to cross that river for some reason. The siege battle is devoid of any strategy as you can't move the units around. You can only choose to wail on the castle gate or shoot down the defenders on the wall, or shoot down the attackers outside if you are the defenders. So these siege battles basically just boil down to a test of patience and not much else. And due to the game's main theme being ascension from a low-rank officer to a high-rank one, and the ultimate goal of the game being variations of bumbling all of the oppositions into submission one way or another, it is honestly rather hard to see a playthrough to its end. I imagine this could be less of a problem if you play as a daimyo, but those characters usually have very strict unlocking conditions compared to the common ones. The original game has 34 endings in total, with 5 more being added to the deluxe version. At this point, I had well over 110 hours with the game, with around 80 hours when the deluxe version got released in 2022, and 30 more hours starting from scratch to prepare for this video. And not once in those 110 hours did I manage to see an ending. Not a single one. This could just be a me problem though, and some might say that the journey is more important than the destination. And I am inclined to agree here because while I failed to reach an ending whatsoever in my 110-hour journey with the game, I still had a lot of fun figuring out how things work and see what the game has in store for myself where so many non-Japanese players missed out, all because the game unfortunately didn't receive an English release whatsoever. Which made me wonder, why though? Why did the series never receive an English localization? Did the game not sell very well, even in its whole home country of Japan, which made the series to be absent for almost 20 years and the latest release in 2022 just an updated port? Well, in a financial report in March of 2005, we can see Koei reporting that Taikō 5 had sold about 80,000 units up to September of 2004, which honestly sounds pretty low when nowadays games usually ship hundreds of thousands or even a million units. Even when you compare the game's sales numbers to its peers, it still falls behind quite a bit, like the first Samurai Warriors game, which was released in Japan for the PlayStation 2 in February of 2004, meaning just 1 month earlier than Taikō 5, and it sold 390,000 units according to the report. Though to be fair, if you compare Taikō 5 with something more of its size like Romance of the Three Kingdoms 10, which was released for Windows in July 2004, which only sold for 50,000 units, then Taikō 5 doesn't really seem that bad. But then again, the reports only count the sales for RTK 10's Windows release, as the PlayStation 2 port didn't come out until January of 2005. Fast forward a little bit to July 2022, 2 months after the release of the deluxe version. Koei Tecmo reported that the game has at the time sold for over 160,000 units, doubling the amount of sales the original game had in half a year. In comparison, Nobunaga's Ambition Shinsei sold around 200,000 units around the same time frame, and its international version, Awakening, sold around 150,000 units. So all things considered, the game did do okay enough for a niche historical simulation, but for one reason or another, an English localization never materialized, and the future of the series is still pretty much undetermined. Which feels rather weird to me because in an interview with Game Creators Guild Gaming News website in July of 2022, the team behind the game was asked as to why the team wanted to make the deluxe version of Taikō 5, which they answered, and I paraphrased, that within promotional materials for OTK 14, there are a lot of foreign fans asking about the Taikō Risshiden series. So why didn't you guys bring the game to foreign market, huh? Though to be fair, in that interview article there was no mention of who was actually being interviewed, whereas in an interview with Dengeki Online Gaming News website in February of 2022, Ichigoya Kazuhiro, the producer of Taikō Risshiden V DX, as well as Romance of the Three Kingdoms 14, was asked a similar question, and he specifically pointed out that it was the Chinese and Korean fans who raised such a question. So maybe it was a case of a telephone game where one interview article paraphrased another and the original wording got lost somewhere along the way, who knows. But Taikō Risshiden V DX only released with Japanese and Chinese scripts. Where's the Korean translation for those foreign demands, huh? Seriously, by what metric did Koei Tecmo go by to think that the game doesn't have enough appeal to warrant bringing it overseas? Even the latest Nobunaga's Ambition game, Awakening, needed to wait a full year to get a localization, which to be fair ended up working out more for the English-speaking player base because Awakening came with the Power Up Kit expansion in one package, but still, them not bringing the game overseas immediately kinda paints the picture that they weren't exactly confident in the project. Or maybe I'm just reading too much into this, who knows? When Taikō Risshiden V DX was released, Koei Tecmo was on a streak of doing only enhanced parts of their own games, but now that Koei Tecmo is open to the idea of doing remakes, hopefully they are willing to give Taikō Risshiden series another chance via a remake or something. But when they do, I hope they don't follow the example of RTK 8 remake, because that one is much more akin to an actual new game instead of a remake in my opinion. So yeah, that was my brief retrospective review of Taikō Risshiden V DX. Are you familiar with the series, or is this the first time you have heard of it? Are you interested in checking the series out? Comment down below how you feel about the series or what you think might have been the reason as to why Koei didn't bring the series overseas, because I seriously have no idea.